Okay. Good evening. My name is Zach Desjardins. I'm with the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, and I wanted to welcome you to this meeting to discuss the 2024 repaving proposed in Braddock District, Mason District, and Springfield Districts. Before we begin, I'd like to review some guidelines so that everyone can participate and get the most out of this session. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be posted on YouTube, then linked to the project webpage. Microsoft Teams offers a live caption service. You can find it by clicking the three dots and choosing Turn on Live Captions. Once the presentation is complete, we will begin the question answer portion, during which participants will ask their questions aloud. The chat feature has been disabled for this meeting, so we will not be taking written questions here. If you're on the phone, please hold your questions to the end. We will have instructions on how to ask questions at the conclusion of today's presentation. We also encourage you to submit your feedback online using the online survey, online feedback form, or phone call. Again, we'll have the addresses for you at the end of the presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Sally Kittlev from Supervisor Walkinshaw's office. I'd also like to introduce our first presenter from the Virginia Department of Transportation, VDOT, Mr. Andy Beecher, who is the Assistant Transportation and Land Use Director for Northern Virginia. Next, I will introduce our other presenter from Fairfax County Department of Transportation, Hannah Kackner, who is an Active Transportation Planner 2 in the Active Transportation section. Andy from VDOT will begin with a presentation on VDOT's repaving program. Afterwards, Hannah from Fairfax FCDOT will present slides on FCDOT's proposed restriping projects as part of the 2024 repaving program. This will include any crosswalks or bike lanes that FCDOT is proposing through the 2024 program. With that, I will turn it over to Andy.
All right, well, thank you very much, Zach. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now and pull up my presentation. Let me know if you're able to see that.
Yes, I can. Oh.
Did it come through?
I'm sorry, not yet.
Yeah, not seeing it yet.
Let me try one more time.
I see it now.
Okay, there we go. All right, well, once again, good evening, everyone. I'm Andy Beecher with Virginia Department of Transportation. I'm gonna go right into our agenda for this evening. So I'm going to start off by giving you all some background information about the Northern Virginia District, as well as our paving program in general, and then review the upcoming 2024 paving budget, as well as the paving plan for this paving season. And then I'm going to wrap up the presentation by going over some helpful links, as well as contact information. And as you may know, when we talk about our roadway inventory, we discuss it in terms of lane miles. Overall, you can see how Northern Virginia compares to districts in the rest of the state in size and number of lane miles, with about 14,200. So about middle of the pack in terms of lane miles, but obviously in a much smaller geographical area than the other districts. So if we break that number down by the 4 counties that make up the Northern Virginia district, a little over 50% of those lane miles are in Fairfax County. And in Loudoun County, it's about 25%. In Prince William County, 22%. And then Arlington County is 2%. And one of the things to keep in mind with that number is the fact that Arlington County maintains their own secondary roads. In general, for the paving program, while the construction period occurs during the warmer months from April to October/November, the planning that goes into that is essentially year-round. So starting in the spring, data is gathered for the next calendar year, and then later in the summer and fall, that data is reviewed, schedules and contracts are prepared and then advertised for bids, and prior year contracts are closed out. And then finally, in the winter time frame, bids are received and evaluated, contracts are executed, and then ultimately notice to proceed is given to the contractors for the next season. A question that we do often get asked is how roads are selected for repaving. And primarily, we do look at the pavement conditions of that roadway using specific measurements that we take in the field. However, in doing so, we also consider the roadway traffic volumes. Obviously, higher volumes are going to cause a roadway to deteriorate quicker. We also look to avoid locations with upcoming roadway projects or underground utility projects where the roadway would get torn up almost immediately after being repaved. We certainly want to avoid that. We do often group projects for economies of scale to minimize our mobilization costs, such as doing repaving for an entire neighborhood. And as we get towards the end of the season, if we're running out of time to complete an entire neighborhood, we might opt to just do the main streets in that neighborhood, giving us a leg up for the next season when we go back and finish out the neighborhood. And then lastly, very important to what we do is the feedback that we receive from our maintenance crews who are out in the field every day and get to see firsthand what's going on out there. So when we're asked about how we collect the data that we use for our paving program, this is the machine or truck that we use to do that. The vehicle, which is called the Automatic Road Analyzer, or ARAN, collects a number of different types of data in real time, looking at such things as pavement distress, roughness, texture, and rutting. And it uses various techniques such as digital scanning, digital measurements, video and imagery, as well as GPS. As far as how often we collect this data, we, on an annual basis, will collect the data for our interstate roads, our primaries, as well as our high volume secondary roads. And when we say high volume, that means any highway that has an average daily traffic greater than 3,500 vehicles per day. And then on our lower volume secondary roads, which is less than 3,500 vehicles per day, we do about 20% annually, so that in about 5 years, we will have collected data on 100% of our secondary roads. And obviously the reason behind that is we have so many secondary roads that are low volume, but also they tend to wear more slowly than our higher volume roads. The pavement ratings that we calculate themselves are based on what is called the Critical Condition Index, or CCI. And overall, any pavement with a rating below 60 is considered poor or very poor, and 60 and above is considered fair to excellent. And we strive to keep all of our roadways in that 60 and above scoring criteria. As an agency, VDOT has set targets for each of its districts with respect to pavement sufficiency. So for interstates, the target is to have 82% of all interstate roadways with a CCI of 60 or above. For our high volume primaries, the target is also 82%. For the low volume primaries, it's 75%. High volume secondaries is 82%, and then the low volume secondaries is 60%. And then over here, you can see the Northern Virginia district, how we've done in meeting our targets for the 2023 season. We met all of them but one. We were just a few percentage points short with the high volume secondaries, but obviously we continue to put a lot of effort into meeting those targets, and we'll try and catch up with that in our upcoming paving cycles. On this next slide, you can see a snapshot of the current pavement conditions throughout our region. The color code for the legend is on the right. You can see that blue is excellent, green is good, yellow is fair, the magenta looking color is poor, red is very poor, and then gray is not rated. Obviously, we do still have a lot of work to do out there, and we'll continue pushing to try and get rid of those red colors as much as we can. There are different types of pavement treatments that we employ depending on the condition of the roadway. In some cases, we do elect to use a preventative type treatment. You can see that at the top of the slide. You may have heard of something called slurry seal or latex. These are treatments that we can use to help extend the life of the pavement. Perhaps it's not quite ready for a full repave. So we can do that. It gives us a little bit more time to fully extend the life of that pavement. And then within the gray area, that's our typical repaving operations. So we have the corrective maintenance and the restorative maintenance using the plant mix. With corrective, we mill less than 2 inches and then overlay 2 inches of surface mix asphalt back. With restorative, we're going to go down a little deeper, up to 4 inches, and overlay back surface mix and intermediate mix asphalt. And let me go back just a second. There are instances where we have a roadway that is in pretty bad shape. It is rare because obviously we're trying to maintain them to the highest standard that we can. But in those instances, we do something called a full depth reclamation, where we actually excavate out the existing pavement, put back 6 to 8 inches of pavement stabilization, and then 2 to 4 inches of intermediate and surface mix asphalt. On this next slide, I have a table that shows you the current paving budget for this paving season, as well as the past 5 years. You can see that we have a pretty healthy total budget this year of $128 million. One of the things I do want to point out, though, is that the cost per lane mile has gone up significantly. It's now up over $150,000 per lane mile, which ultimately means that we're only able to do about 851 lane miles this season, as opposed to previous seasons where we've done well over 1,000. So just one of the realities that we're dealing with inflation and such. But we'll continue to push to keep our secondary roads as well as our primaries and interstates up to standards as best we can. On this slide, you can see a snapshot of the 2024 paving map. This is available on the virginiaroads.org website and gives you an indication of what roads are scheduled to be repaved in your neighborhood and community. The color red indicates roadways that are scheduled to be repaved. Green is in progress, and then blue is completed. And so I encourage you, if you get a chance, to go to the Virginia Roads website, take a look. It'll give you an opportunity. It is GIS based, so you can zoom in and look at areas around your neighborhood. When it comes to pavement marking and striping, the way our contracts are set up, we typically replace in kind the existing striping. Occasionally, we are able to make minor changes to the striping during repaving, but more elaborate changes, such as those for bike lanes or new crosswalks, road diets, etc., these require significant prior planning and coordination between the county and VDOT. And so if one or more of these more significant changes is requested on a road that is scheduled for repaving, what we typically do in most cases is we'll defer that work to a future year to allow us appropriate time to do the necessary planning and analyses to make sure that what's being proposed is going to be safe and effective for the traveling public. And I think Hannah is going to go into a little bit more detail about proposals related to those types of initiatives. Okay, my concluding slide here is just showing you some useful links and phone numbers to take advantage of. If you do see an issue out there on the roadways, you can always go to our MyVDOT webpage. That's my.vdot.virginia.gov. or call our 1-800 number, 1-800-4ROAD. That's 1-800-367-7623. And I think I'm going to wrap up there. Normally, I like to do a live demonstration of the paving plan map that's available on Virginia roads. But unfortunately, I wasn't able to access that night. I'm having a glitch with my internet access here. So if I can pull it up later, I will see if I can do that. But for right now, I think I'll go ahead and wrap up and turn things over to Hannah.
Thanks, Andy. Okay. Can everyone see my screen there?
Yes.
Yes, I can see it.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. So at this point, I'm just going to move on to FCDOT's proposed striping modifications as part of the 2024 repaving program. So I'll just start off with a little bit of background on Fairfax County's role in the repaving program. Each year, we collaborate with VDOT to provide new striping improvements on our roadways. Typically, these are in the form of crosswalks and bike lanes, but we are limited to roadway segments that VDOT is already repaving, so any proposed crosswalks or bike lanes must fall within the area that VDOT is already repaving. And also of note, the scope of this project on FCDOT's end really does not extend beyond adding striping to the roadway. So improvements like protected bike lanes or sidewalks are not something we're able to add through this program. So a major reason that we do this, specifically doing things like adding bike lanes and road diets, is to repurpose underutilized roadway space. Many of our roads here in Fairfax County were built with much wider travel lanes than really are necessary, or with too many travel lanes, which can lead to some safety issues like speeding or inattentive driving. And the repaving program allows us to bring the lane sizes down to a more appropriate size by adding improvements like bike lanes, which can make the road appear more narrow and improve safety for all users at relatively little cost. Typically, the traffic capacity at signals is maintained, and we'll also try to maintain legal on-street parking where space allows. And adding bike lanes through the repaving program also aids in the implementation of our planned bicycle network for the county. So as you can see from this photo, you really get a nice traffic calming effect through adding bike lanes, as we did here on Annandale Road through the repaving program. And with that additional striping, drivers are just given a visual impression that the roadway width has been reduced, which has been shown to slow vehicle speeds. And these are just the three types of on-street bicycle facilities that you'll see here in Fairfax County. We typically don't usually add sharrows and are trying to move away from standard bike lanes with the goal of adding as many buffered bike lanes as possible, just to give cyclists some additional separation between themselves and the vehicle lane, which provides a more comfortable experience for cyclists. And although this program only allows us to stripe bike lanes, adding a buffer where possible gives us the option in the future to protect the bike lane by adding physical barriers through other projects. So this diagram just shows a categorization of the four types of cyclists that we typically see. And while we're not able to build trails or protected bike lanes through the repaving program, we are just trying to provide as many standard and buffered bike lanes as possible. But with our standard bike lanes, our primary users typically fall into those two groups at the top there. And these are just a few benefits of adding bicycle infrastructure. As you can see, there are benefits to all roadway users and not just cyclists. And again, the bike lanes just provide a nice traffic calming effect by making the roadway appear narrower to drivers. And another benefit that I like to highlight is that bike lanes can make a road feel safer for pedestrians by just providing a buffer between the pedestrians and the vehicles, and also by minimizing a pedestrian's exposure to traffic when they're crossing the street and giving them a better vantage point of that oncoming traffic. So just moving on to our proposed striping modifications in Braddock District. First up, we have a proposed bike lane project on Hemming Avenue between Braddock Road and Hemming Place. Currently, this segment of Hemming Avenue has two very wide travel lanes with on-street parking on both sides of the street and then sidewalks on both sides. Aside from a half block where there's some missing sidewalk between Jervis Street and Braddock Road. Currently, there are no on-street bike facilities and there are 3 existing crosswalks on Hemming. And adding bike lanes would provide connections to existing bike lanes on Queensbury Avenue, as well as to North Springfield Elementary School, Lake Accotink Park, and some future asphalt paths that are planned along the side of Braddock Road. And so we did perform a parking utilization study along Hemming Avenue, and overall found that most homes have a fair amount of parking between garages and driveways. And this is just a spatial representation of our findings. The area in green represents where we observe the lowest usage of on-street parking, and the orange is where we observed the highest usage of on-street parking. And so what we're proposing here is adding bike lanes by narrowing travel lanes and removing some street parking per the county-wide bicycle master plan. And if implemented, they would look something like these bike lanes on Ravenswood Road that were also implemented through the repaving program. Unfortunately, the road is not quite wide enough to do a buffer, so they would just be standard bike lanes. And so in order to do that, we have a few different options. And I'll just add that we have instructions at the end of the presentation on how to vote and provide input on each option through an online survey. The first of these is to add bike lanes on Hemming Place and Braddock Road, but retain the southbound parking bay between Axton Street and Hemming Court. So essentially, we would be repurposing all of the street parking except for the most heavily used segment. And as a result, the bike lane would run uphill, but cyclists would share the street going downhill and would not have a dedicated lane in that segment, but we would be retaining parking on one side of that road. And so this aerial is just showing the one section in red where we would retain parking if we went with this option. And so our second option is to add bike lanes along the entire stretch of Hemming Avenue between Braddock Road and Hemming Place, repurposing all of the street parking. And so the bike lanes would run along that entire segment in green. And I will also add that there is a third option to just repave the road as is without adding any bike lanes, removing no parking, and that will also be listed as an option on the survey. So again, I'll just emphasize that whichever option we go with will depend heavily on community input. So crosswalk enhancements are another opportunity to improve pedestrian safety through the repaving program that we have. And sometimes we'll have to restrict parking on the approach to a crosswalk to comply with the state code so that a parked vehicle will not obstruct the view of a pedestrian in the crosswalk from other drivers. We will also sometimes upgrade existing crosswalks to high visibility, like the one you see in this photo. And we'll also look for opportunities to add striping for future pedestrian refuge islands. Although we can't add the actual pedestrian refuge island like this one you see in the photo, we can at least do the striping to reduce costs in those future projects. So our first proposed crosswalk is on Hemming Avenue at Hogarth Street. And so adding that crosswalk would require us to eliminate 6 spaces on the southbound side of the street and 2 spaces on the northbound side of the street, as you see here in yellow. We have another proposed crosswalk at Hemming Avenue and Elgar Street, and adding this crosswalk would also require us to repurpose a little bit of street parking. So that would be 5 spaces on the southbound side and then 6 spaces on the northbound side. And then our third and final crosswalk that we have proposed in Braddock District is also on Hemming Avenue at Axton Street. And then this one would require repurposing 10 spaces on the southbound side of the street and 5 spaces on the northbound side of the street. And then we are also proposing 1 crosswalk in the Springfield district at Center Road and Garden Road. And for this one, we would need to repurpose 7 spaces on the eastbound side of the street and then 2 spaces on the westbound side of the street. If you have any paving related comments, including drainage issues, missing signage, signal repair, walker repair, and site distance issues related to vegetation overgrowth, those should all be submitted to VDOT through the My VDOT portal, which is linked here. If you'd like to request road repairs, please follow the I Need a Road Repair link on the VDOT portal or call 1-800-4ROAD. We also have the project webpage linked here, which has our survey, our proposed project scopes, tonight's presentation, and additional information about the repaving program. We welcome any and all feedback and are accepting comments until April 25th. And this will all be collected and passed along to Supervisors Walkinshaw and Supervisor Harity, who will make a final decision on everything in their respective districts. So before I move on to the question and answer portion, as I mentioned, we'll be collecting feedback for the next 2 weeks. This year, in addition to accepting any feedback over the phone and by mail, we're also accepting surveys via a platform called Public Input. So this link you see on the screen, publicinput.com/E8781, you'll be able to answer questions about your preferences with regard to how Hemming Avenue will be restriped, as well as whether or not you are supportive of the proposed crosswalks in either district. There's also a free-form box at the end of the survey in which you'll have the option to add any additional feedback that you might have for us. And again, comments are due by April 25th. So with that, we can move on to the question and answer portion of the meeting. Zach, would you like to go over the instructions for that?
Yep. Thank you, Anna. We'll now take questions and comments from attendees on both for both districts. It doesn't matter which one you're commenting on. We'll take them all. You may ask your question verbally by raising your hand, located in the top of your screen next to the 3 dots. The moderator will enable your mic and then ask you to call on, and then calling you to ask your question. Please unmute yourself when your name is called and ask your question or provide your comment. Please mute yourself after you've asked your question. We have several people who are calling in by the phone. If you're on the phone, please press *5 to raise your hand. And when you're called upon by your phone number, I'll use your last 4 digits, please press *6 to unmute yourself. After you have finished, please press *6 to mute yourself. Attendees, please be patient as our callers are listening to the system instructions through their phone to participate. We'll not be taking questions in the chat tonight. And our first question is from Stephanie Meadows. I'm unmuting you. You can ask your question after you've unmuted yourself.
Yeah, good evening. Thank you so much. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, this is a very straightforward question from the Garden Road crosswalk demonstration, and thank you so much for all that background information. I'm just curious. I've lived in this neighborhood for 25 plus years, and I'm just curious about the crosswalk now. We just did a redo of Garden Road, and I don't know whether it was Fairfax County or Virginia Department of Transportation or a combination of the two. I'm thinking in the 2016, 2017 timeframe. What's the importance of the crosswalk at this point as opposed to having done it when they redid the whole incline on Garden Road at that point? I'm not understanding the need for this at this point in time.
I can take that one, Hannah. Going back, when the street was redone in 2016 or 2017, did they add that sidewalk along there at the same time?
They did not. That's what they
Oh.
put in, which had been, it was a multi-year project to put that sidewalk in along that one section of Garden. And I don't know why they just didn't, if the crosswalk was so important at that point, why was it not included in the neighborhood at that point in time?
Yeah, I'm curious about that too. I will say that the guidance has changed a little bit to make it a little bit easier for us to put in proposed crosswalks. And so at that time in 2016 and 2017, we would have had to count 20 pedestrians per hour using that crosswalk, and it's probably unlikely we would have gotten that. Now we don't have to make that do that count, and so that's one of the reasons why we can propose this crosswalk here. The reason that we pick this location is it is a low volume street, but it is closer to the high school. When we figured that some of the students are going to be walking to school, and this would be a nice way for them to get to that sidewalk at that location.
Okay, great. Not opposed to the crosswalk. I just find that I've lived in this community for over 25 years. The fact that we even got a sidewalk put in there in that whole time frame was a miracle. And now all of a sudden we're worried about a crosswalk. I just, it's just would have been great to have had that when I moved in here in 1989. But anyway, thank you.
You bet. Thank you for your comment and question. Okay, next we have a person on the phone. And the person on the phone, your last four numbers are 8078. So I'm going to unmute you.
Good evening. My question is, for those of us on the phone, can you please repeat the location of the survey so that I can write it down?
Yes, so that's publicinput.com/E8781.
I don't see him on here anymore.
Oh.
Oh dear. Okay.
Oh. I think he's there. He just lowered his hand.
Oh, okay. All right, great. The next question is from Pulliam. Pulliam, I'm unmuting you.
I think you'll still need to unmute, but your mic has been enabled. If you're talking, we can't hear you at the moment.
If for by some reason you're not able to ask your question in this meeting, there's a comment box at the end of the survey, and you're certainly welcome to ask your question that way. And if you leave your contact information, we can get back to you with an answer. Okay, Pulliam, we're going to come back to you. If you still wish to ask your question, you can raise your hand again. Next, we're going to go to Chris Degnan. Allow your microphone.
Thank you, Zachary. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I just want to speak out in support of this. I wasn't concerned about it as much about the crosswalk at Garden and Center, although it will be nice. But the parking restriction is very much needed. I happen to live in the second house down Garden or north of the intersection, and it's become almost impossible to see to make any kind of turn at that stop sign with cars being on either side of that street so close to the intersection. So I'd actually thought that this should happen before the county proposed it. So I just want to say I support it wholeheartedly. And if anybody objects and you need somebody to testify about it and support it, I am happy to do so.
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
feedback. It's been duly noted.
Thank you.
We're going to move on to Jay. I'm allowing your mic.
Not hearing anything if you're speaking. You'll still need to unmute your mic. Still not hearing anything. Do we want to move on for now and then come back?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Jay. We'll come back to you. I might have something else I can try. Next, we're going to move on to Ivan. I'm allowing your microphone.
If you're speaking, we're also not hearing anything. Once you're unmuted, you'll just need to hit the mic option at the top of your screen to unmute yourself.
I'm going to make you a presenter, Ivan, for a second. See if that will help. Can you hear us now, or can you try speaking again?
Nope. It looks like you're unmuted, so that may have worked. Should you try saying something again?
I'm still seeing a line through Ivan's microphone. Yeah.
Okay. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I'm sorry, Ivan. We're going to come back to you. Okay. Next is we're going to go to Jeff Schaefer. I'm going to allow your microphone.
Hi, good evening. That seemed to work for me, so hopefully others will get it to work for them as well. Thank you very much for the presentation and for these slides and for making these slides available online. I haven't seen them online yet, but I understand that you'll be posting them soon. Really appreciate that. I am a little concerned about removing parking off of the Hemming Street for the bike lanes. Not opposed to bicyclists and bike lanes in general, but removing the parking there does cause me some concern, especially as it might cause some overflow onto the side streets and may impact resale value of the homes and so on. My question is, one option that I think had been floated before was instead of a bike lane to pave and draw paint a line to designate the parking areas so that you would sort of still it would still allow you to decrease the width of the visible travel lane while sort of identifying where the parking is available on the side. So it would sort of achieve at least both of those goals. And in terms of the bike lanes, and part of my concern with that is really that in terms of the bicyclists in the street, in our neighborhood anyway, we have a lot of these bike groups that will come through. They're clubs, they're organizations, they're folks that meet up after work and will go through the neighborhood cycling. And I've driven down Ravensworth and Queensbury where there are bike lanes, and I have seen these groups just totally ignoring the bike lanes completely. I mean, they're traveling in fairly large pelotons. So to me, it doesn't seem like it would be a major benefit to folks compared to normal residents who are probably already using the streets or able to ride in the traffic without there being issues. So I wonder then, just to restate the question, why wasn't the option presented as the option for designating the parking lanes on either side?
Thanks for the question, Jeff. Nice to hear from you. Yeah, so probably 20, 30 years ago, that's probably what we would have proposed, is to designate, paint the parking lanes. But here, since we have a countywide bicycle master plan that shows bike lanes on Hemming Avenue, it was board approved, I think, about a decade ago, or a little under a decade ago. That's what we decided to propose. We also felt that seeing the use of the parking, it wasn't very well used throughout most of the segment, and so that's why we proposed an option that preserves it where it's kind of the most used on that block. But the rest of it, we didn't, since it wasn't very heavily throughout most of the street. We didn't have as much concern about folks overflowing to other parts of the street, and other streets. It might be if there's a car or two or three on one block, they might have to move to another, or one block of Hemming, and they might have to move to another side street. We didn't think that would be a super significant impact. But again, I appreciate the question.
Yeah, so it sounds like that, and I'm sorry, I know that we have other folks with their hands up, but it sounds like then that the primary purpose of this is to have Hemming now come into compliance with this bike lane measure, vice necessarily sort of reducing the width of Hemming. Would you say that's sort of like the priority goal?
I mean, there's two goals. I mean, one is the feedback that we got from you and many of your neighbors was that people speed down Hemming Avenue, and one way that we could attempt to address that is to narrow the lanes, and having a bike lane was the way that we thought that would be a good idea to do that. It also is in our bicycle master plan, so that's why we brought it to you instead of bringing painted parking lanes.
Yeah, and I think we like to try to accomplish both of those goals if possible. Also, so narrowing the road and also providing a separate facility for cyclists. It's hard to predict exactly who's going to use a bike lane, but ultimately our goal is to provide a connected network of bike lanes across the county that people feel comfortable using.
Yeah, and I will say too. I mean, I understand the large cycling groups will ride in the middle of the road. But if there is a designated bike lane, by law, they're supposed to ride into that lane. They're supposed to ride to the right unless there's something obstructing the use of that lane. We're gonna go to B. Grady. I'm gonna unmute yourself, or I'm unmuting you, and then you need to unmute yourself.
Hello. Thank you. I have quite a few questions, so I'll try to be prompt. There was no mention of any modifications to the crosswalk outside of the elementary school. I was pretty vocal about that at the last meeting with multiple safety issues and concerns regarding that crosswalk, that there's been multiple incidents where nobody stops at that crosswalk, multiple incidents of kids almost getting hit. There's literally even police officers who say it's an unsafe location every day as I walk to it twice a day with my children. And there's no mention of that in your proposal. So that would be my first area of question. Do you want me to continue?
I can start with that one. So I think maybe something you had mentioned with that one is the flashing signs, the rectangular rapid flashing beacons as an option for that. Is that correct?
Excuse me, that was one of them, but Since that, actually, I did some further research I had no idea that there actually is some significant no parking signs on each side, but it doesn't help. Like people still, it's not enough space to allow for the visibility. And in addition, I don't know who would be contacted, but there's literally this huge electrical pole in front of the, like right in the crosswalk, like that you can't, it blocks the visibility of the pedestrians. So that's another part of it. But yeah, so then, that goes with just how do you just make sure that the people can be seen and the kids specifically. Yeah.
So unfortunately, everything you've mentioned, except for maybe the parking restrictions, are outside of the scope of this project. So all we're able to do with this project is add additional striping to the road, and make the necessary parking restrictions that come along with that. I did add the request for the rectangular rapid flashing beacon at that intersection to our unfunded list after that meeting. So that is there. And that's something you can maybe talk about more with Supervisor Walkinshaw's office. As far as the utility pole goes, that might be a question for VDOT, I want to say.
Or whoever owns the pole.
Yes.
Unfortunately, the poles are very hard to move. They're pretty expensive, and not.
Yeah, Hannah. Yeah, Hannah and Zach, that would be more of a utility issue.
Okay.
Yeah. I will say one thing. I do have a note that so right now the current crosswalk is just 2 lines, and VDOT's been really great in the recent years of replacing those 2-line crosswalks with these the high visibility ones. They look like piano keys. They're much more visible. And I believe our draft had that on there. I didn't have it in the presentation tonight, but it is something that I will make sure to add and whatnot. So be happy to answer your next question.
Okay, perfect. And then with Axton and Hogarth, I saw there was only crosswalks on one side of each of those, and I was curious why. For example, with the Axton one, the bus stop is actually on the other side of the street, and so the kids would actually need to cross the street in order to go to the crosswalk. So is there a reason why we're not putting crosswalks on both sides of the street like you did on whatever Elgar? I
And
think.
Elgar, yeah. We can look at that and potentially move it to the other side. Is Hogarth also on the
I mean, it's kind of like it actually needs to be, specifically Axton, because it's on top of that hill. Like
Yep.
you can barely see anybody if you're coming up. The kids get dropped off on the other side of the street, so it really needs to be on that side. But then if you're crossing at another time, which is the kids coming up from North Springfield to then cross the street, those are the kids who need the crosswalk on the other side of the street. So especially Axton is the number one, I would say, that needs the 2 crosswalks. Hogarth, I mean, I believe that's a high school drop off, as though I don't know much about that one as far as the bus stop for that one, but I was just curious why it was only one side of the street versus 2.
Yeah, typically when we propose new crosswalks, we usually will, at a unsignalized crossing like this, we'll usually do 1. But I will I have a note to ask and see if we can do a second one at Axton. Thank you.
This is Sally. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, good. I've had issues unmuting myself. So, ma'am, I just wanted to mention to you that you are welcome to email Supervisor Walkinshaw's office with your additional concerns related to that crosswalk, and I'm happy to work with you on that. The issues that are unrelated to this particular meeting. So you can email Braddock at fairfaxcounty.gov, and that email will be routed to me.
Okay. Thank you. I will do that. The last question was with one of the proposals that limited the, let's see, it was limiting the street parking. But if you already limited the street, you limited the street parking on Axton, but then with the crosswalk, I'm sorry, you gave street parking on Axton on one side, but then with the crosswalk, you limited it there was one proposal that was very confusing regarding the Axton option that
Oh, do you want to cycle back to that, Hannah, real quick in
Sure.
that slide?
Because it was basically because of the crosswalk, you couldn't do parking on within a certain amount of space. But then,
Yep.
yeah, there you go. But then on one of the proposals on that one side, on one side of Axton was going to be the parking. Is that
Yeah, so depending on the feedback we get, so the idea was we wanted to provide people an opportunity to either, if they want to support a crosswalk only, they can do that. And so if we were to implement, say, the crosswalk or crosswalks at Axton Street, and restrict the parking, we'd be able to do that regardless of what people thought about the bicycle lane.
okay?
And so that's why we've got them both. So if we were to do the bike lane on, so it would be on the uphill side here on the right hand side of the street. We would retain the street parking, but it would only start essentially where the end of that yellow bar is on the left side, because we couldn't put it in the crosswalk without that. It's a state requirement. So that's how it would work.
Okay.
So these
Alright,
these parking restrictions are basically assuming like there are no bike lanes and we're not restricting any parking, correct, Zach? Or
Yes.
okay,
Thank you.
I think, yeah. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you for your thoughts and questions. I'm going to disable your mic and I'm going to go to Jay, trying again. Allowing your mic. And Jay, I'm going to make you a presenter, so hopefully we can try it
Can you
that way.
try unmuting yourself now?
Still not
hearing
able to hear you,
Jay.
Jay. Again, folks, if anyone thinks of a question later, or if you're not able to answer or ask your question now, feel free to you can just fill out the comment box and the survey, and if you leave your contact information, you can ask your question there, and we will be happy to get back to you. I'm sorry, Jay. I'm going to move to there's one more person here or several more questions. We're going to move on to the person with the phone number that the phone number that ends in 6752. I've allowed your mic. Plus *6 to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, hi. This is Ivan. I was trying to reach you before. I decided to call.
I'm glad you found us.
I had some problems. But I have a few requests and questions. First, if you can place all your presentation online so everybody can review it. Also, your comment link online, it doesn't go anywhere. If you can make it available. Also, if you can give additional time, because just a few people deciding what to do on this part of the neighborhood, I don't think it's fair. Also, I don't know if you were able to contact all the homes that are going to be affected for real with the bike lanes or crosswalks, because they are the real ones that somehow need to decide, I guess, if we go with this or not. I kind of opposed to having bike lanes because right now it's a very busy street or avenue, and I think you're going to have lots of accidents. Even right now, we have people riding bikes, speeding, and not stopping anywhere. And I believe some time ago, a few years ago, the community decided not to have bikes on a civic association meeting that we had. I don't know if you were able to consider all that. But also, when are you going to decide this? I mean, how many are you going to post all the inputs that anybody will place on this issue? How many are saying yes to the bikes? How many no to the bikes? How many just to the crosswalks, as you're saying? Because you just have 2 weeks and only 27 people in this meeting. Thank you.
Thanks for your thoughts, Ivan. Yes, we will be posting the presentation tomorrow along with the this video as well. I will double check the comment link. I thought it was working, but if it's not working, we'll make sure it's working. And regarding your request for extra time, we typically provide 2 weeks. So VDOT's paving crew is out. They start paving the street because it's the weather's much warmer, and that's why we have that that 2 weeks, and that's what we do for all of our districts. But again, thank you.
Are you going to post all the comments, like 6 said yes, 20 said no, or whatever?
So the way that the survey is supposed to work is you should be able to view the results, but I'm not sure. This is a new way of doing new way of doing input for us as well. Typically in the past we've just accepted emails, and we haven't posted those. But I will check, and yes, we will update the repaving program website. Can you go back one slide, Anna?
Yep.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're on the phone. But if you go to fairfaxcounty.gov or .gov/transportation/2024-paving-and-restriping-program, or if you just search for 2024 repaving program Fairfax County, you'll be able to get to the website, and we can update that with what's decided and for your street. So thank you again. Oh, sorry.
And did you reach all the neighbors or all the homes that will be affected by these changes, proposed changes, or?
Typically, we don't mail people. To do a project like this, we don't typically send mailers to every single person. I think there were 98 homes along Hemming Avenue. But do feel free to spread the word and share with folks who you think might be interested in commenting. We really appreciate that.
And Zach, this
Thank you
is
very
Sally again. I'll just add that FCDOT did have a meeting with the Civic Association. I think that was back in February, if I recall correctly, or very early March, to present the proposal on the bike lane. So people have heard this proposal through that meeting, and then additionally, our office, Supervisor Walkinshaw's office, has been including this in the weekly newsletter, trying to spread word. So unfortunately, it is a very challenging process to get everyone or help make everyone aware of meetings like this and proposals like this, because some people are just busy and don't really want to be involved at this level of things in their communities. So yeah, please do spread the word. We would greatly appreciate it.
Thank you, Sally. The next person is Marie Norman. I'm going to allow your microphone.
Not hearing anything. You could maybe try unmuting one more time.
Still not hearing you, Marie.
You want to try making her a presenter?
Yeah, let's do that real quick.
All right, try unmuting yourself now, Marie. Still showing up as muted for me.
Try speaking because oh, it looked like it was unmuted for a second.
Yeah, you were muted for like 1 second.
Yeah.
I'm seeing that you're unmuted, just not hearing anything.
Yeah, I'm really sorry, Mary. I'm going to move on to the next person here. Again, feel free to fill out that comment box at the bottom of the survey, and we'll be happy to answer your question that way. Next, we're going to move on to A, and we're going to allow your microphone. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Yeah, hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. Curious on, it seems like on the restriping and repaving, the latter, and I'm a resident that lives beyond the park on Hemming. And we have, note right, the center line at minimum goes just on the big sweeping curve that just past the park entrance and then stops. And there's no center line the rest of the way down Hemming. And it's quite, there's some significant hills that have blind spots. There's cars that are constantly crossing over, and you're as a resident, and the whole speeding. I mean, speeding at the upper part of Hemming carries through all the way back to the very end of Hemming. Additionally, those bike trains that they were talking about, they come down and do the cul-de-sac as a turnaround down here. But kind of really curious on why is there, and I haven't seen it, and if I'm missing something, please help me understand, but it seems like there's nothing to address centerline striping beyond where it stops now, just past the park. And why is that?
So just for your awareness, so that the paving ends at Hemming Place. So essentially, where just before the park entrance. So we're not really able to add a center line further down. Typically, roads have to have a certain level of traffic volume to add a center line, and I think, yeah, that part of Hemming kind of dead ends. So it's possible that when the center line was added, many years ago, it ended for that reason. Although it does kind of go past the entrance too. I'm not totally sure why it does that.
Yeah, and I would just put, I understand the project ends at Hemming Place, but it's while the
Mhm.
equipment's here. It's one of these things that is a critical. There's been plenty of accidents on this part of Hemming down here, and it is just as populated as any other part of Hemming. In fact, it may be more populated because the housing lots were built after. That's the old section. This is the newer section. The housing lots are closer together, the sidelines, so they're narrower lots. And I would just say, I understand where the project's limits are, but something to then put into your list of concerns if you're addressing, right, these types of safety concerns in the neighborhood, and you're here now. It not having a center line it's a big problem for that. So.
Okay. I will get with our my VDOT colleagues and I can ask about it. It is outside the paving area, so it's certainly always a challenge to address those kind of things. But I'll see what I can do. And I'm sorry I can't promise anything.
No, understood. Thank you for the clarification and thank you for the consideration. Have a wonderful evening.
Yeah, thank you. You too. Bye-bye. So next we have a person on the phone, and oop. They just dropped off, or
Is it working now?
yes.
Okay, so this is Jay. I've tried 3 times on the web browser
Oh
on
my
Teams,
goodness.
and the problem is there's no obvious setting to go off mute. And this may be other people's problems too. The thing that would take you off mute is darkened.
Oh,
So
I am
that may
so
be why
sorry.
people are
I'm
having
so glad
trouble.
you found this. Yes, yeah. Well, I
Yeah,
appreciate
so
you
I finally
working through that.
dialed in on a phone. So I'm
Yeah.
despite my age, I'm technically capable. So, but thanks for the presentation. That was very interesting, including all the stuff about how they decide to, redo roads and stuff like that. Because I know there's only so much money in the budget. I'm actually across the street from Jeff, who spoke earlier. So I'm on the side that's uphill from the park. And I have to say, and this is with respect to Sally, if there was a decision made several years ago that parking would be eliminated in front of my house, I'd never heard about it. And the gentleman who spoke earlier, I won't echo what they said. A few years ago, and I don't know how much of this background you know, there were a whole series of public meetings here about whether we should have speed bumps and traffic calming measures. There was a vote taken by after several meetings on this. What I hear now is that we have until like next week or 2 weeks to get something into the supervisor, and then potentially the parking in front of my house is going to be eliminated. I think the people up the street from me would be very surprised to hear that decision is being made that quickly, and without anyone coming to them. You said, and I don't mean to be disrespectful, but Zachary, you made a comment that was a little flip, I thought, about people didn't, and I'm not pointing at you, but I didn't think it would be that much of an imposition to, park on a side street. There are no side streets from where I live until you get to Queensbury. So if I have company, shall I tell them to park a quarter mile up the street or a half mile up the street and walk to my house? There just hasn't been much thought into this. If you do the parking on one side of the street, what will happen is they're all going to move to the other side of the street. And then the sight lines for those of us trying to back out of our driveway are going to be impossible. And there are going to be more accidents. I looked at the study, the traffic parking study that was done. I don't know when they did this. The number of cars that they have counted in here on the street out in front of me. I look out my window now, I see more cars than were counted in that study. I think that study is flawed. You're talking about I know there are people who have, you said 5, I think that says 5 parking spaces per lot. I spent $12,000 to build a second part of a driveway on my house because 3 cars across the street were totaled by people speeding down the street. And I don't want to park on the street. That's why I don't park on the street. But I know a lot of people around here do park on the street because they don't have 5 parking places. So what you're basically saying is if I have company, I can't park in front of my house. If I need to move one of my cars, I can't park in front of my house. If you put bike lanes on both sides of the street, I'll have to park, and my company will have to park a quarter to a half a mile away. That's not what I bought when I bought this house in 1988. That's not the nature of this community. And I'm very concerned that this thing is being dropped on us with very little input, no ability for input. And I have to say, frankly, very little notice, real notice to the people who are materially affected by this. And that's very troubling. That's not the way I expect my government to work.
Thank you for your comment. Yeah. Did
Sir,
you have a question, or just? Go ahead.
Sorry, this is Sally again. Sir, can I ask that you would go ahead and submit your comments through the link that they're providing. And if you'd like to additionally also, you can email Braddock District Supervisor at braddock@fairfaxcounty.gov. My understanding is that our office will be able to view the comments that are submitted too. But, you know, we do want to hear from everybody. And unfortunately, the RTAP process with the speed bumps is a very different process than this. And that's why it went through a ballot. Those processes often take 1.5 to 2 years to go through a community. And that's a community-driven process, where this process is driven annually by VDOT for the paving, and then, as was explained earlier, FCDOT kind of tags on to do any potential restriping. But we do want to hear from the community, and we do want to hear concerns. So I appreciate you sharing yours. Thank you.
Well, but the point you made is very good. There was a lot of community input on this. We haven't had a real ability for the 93 affected people to have much input on this. I hope James will look into this. I'd be happy to contact the office. I've been in contact with you. Guys are very helpful. So I don't want to take up much more time, but Zachary, that wasn't directed at you or any of the staff for your presentation or anything like that. I didn't mean. Hope I didn't sound disrespectful, but I am concerned.
Yeah, thank you, and I do apologize if I came off as flippant. That was certainly not my intent.
Yeah, and I'll just add that this process does seem a little bit rushed sometimes, because VDOT doesn't publish their final repaving list until we didn't receive it until about a week ago. Just because there are a lot of moving parts, and maybe Andy can speak a little bit more to that, but we're not really able to do much formal public engagement until that list is finalized, because I mean, there was always a chance that VDOT could have taken this road off of their list, and then we wouldn't have any plans to go off. So that's just a little bit of the reason why it does seem a little bit rushed.
And Hannah, that's a really good point. I appreciate that. Last year, we thought that there were going to be bike lanes paved on Guinea Road near where there was a pedestrian fatality 2 years ago. And at the last minute, that plan was changed by VDOT. So it is just a very tight turnaround. Even the supervisor's office didn't get the list or the map listing out the streets for repaving until last week. So it is just a tight schedule with how everything is analyzed and planned out by VDOT, and I know they're constantly working on it, but it is a tight schedule for everyone right now.
Yeah. Okay, Marie, I'm going to unmute you. And I'm going to actually make you a presenter just so I can. You should be able to ask your question now.
You'll still need to unmute though.
Yeah, you got to click the unmute in the upper part of the screen, microphone symbol.
It looks like you're unmuted now. If you could try speaking. Oh. Now it looks like you're muted again.
Okay, so again, as anyone has not had a chance to answer a question, or if you think of a question as you're filling out the survey, or just think of any question in general, please feel free to list that in the comment box. We'll definitely be sure and respond. And I will say every comment we get, it will also be forwarded to the supervisor's office, so the supervisor will walk and chalk and see it. Okay. Okay, so I don't see any more questions, so we're going to conclude tonight's meeting. As a reminder, feedback can be submitted until 2 weeks after the presentation date using the following channels. Submit a survey response at https publicinput.com / go back to the slide for me, Hannah. I gotta make sure this is the right one. /E8781. You can also leave a recorded message with comments at 703-890-5898, project code 10225. You can also send me a letter to the address below, 4050 Legato Road, Suite 400, zip code 22033, Fairfax, Virginia. Attention, Zachary Desjardins. For more information about the repaving program and to review the proposed striping in your district, please visit the project webpage, https://www.fairfaxcounty.gov/transportation/2024-paving-restriping. This concludes our meeting for the 2024 repaving program. A recording of the meeting will be available on the project webpage in the next day or so. Thank you very, very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time, participation, and hearing your thoughts and comments. Have a great night.
Thank you,
all. Good night.
everyone. Have a good night.
Good night, everyone.